And good evening and welcome to RFL. I'm Richard French. So tonight we're going to do something a little different. We're going to spend most of the program talking about policing in America, also rising crime, and how we, the people, feel about what's going on our streets. And you, our viewers, are going to be a big part of our conversation. Phone lines, they're open as we speak. We're going to field your phone calls, and here is the question. Why are we seeing a spike in violent crime in America? Toll-free number right there, 888-766-2428. The phone lines fill fast, so call now. Now, if you'd rather email or tweet, send us a comment or question to rfl@rnntv.com, or you can send us a tweet. Reach us at LarryEP13. Ever since George Floyd was killed by police in Minneapolis on Memorial Day, Americans, they've been taking to the streets to protest racism and policing, and they've been demanding reforms. Also this summer, crime has been soaring in many parts of this country. In New York City, shootings up 60% this year compared to last year. But this summer, arrests down overall, also same for gun crimes. But it is hardly just a problem of the Big Apple. Homicides up nearly 40% in Chicago this summer, and weekends with dozens of shootings have sadly become commonplace. Just yesterday, a drive-by shooting at a funeral home injured more than a dozen people who were there to pay respects to the victim of another drive-by. The superintendent of Chicago, he had this to say about what is happening in his city.
The cycle is fueled by street gangs, guns, and drugs. Put your guns down. We can't keep meting out violence with violence. An eye for an eye makes us both blind.
I'm going to tell you about more cities with more grim numbers. In LA, homicides up by 23% this year. Go down to Houston. The police department says murders are up by more than a third this year, and they're on track for a 5-year high. Take a listen to the chief of police describing possible causes for the surge in violence.
In the last few years, we've been seeing criminal justice reform that we support as police chiefs, going from a mindset of we should focus on violent criminals to now we should coddle everybody, not just low-level misdemeanors and nonviolent suspects, but even violent individuals. And I think we're starting to see the impact across the nation.
And now you have President Trump weighing in, threatening to send federal officers into more American cities. We've already seen them clashing with anti-police protesters in Portland, even arresting people and shoving them into unmarked vans. Today, the president said he's planning to send Homeland Security officers to other cities across this country.
Today, I'm announcing a surge of federal law enforcement into American communities plagued by violent crime. We'll work every single day to restore public safety, protect our nation's children, and bring violent perpetrators to justice.
And the mayors of almost every city that is being targeted do not want those forces. Okay, a lot to discuss. And let's bring in our guests. Former NYPD Chief of Department Philip Banks. He was the highest ranking uniformed officer in the department. And former NYPD Deputy Inspector Anthony Raganella. And both of these guys know each other well. And they're kind enough to give us their time tonight. All right, we're going to break this into two parts. We'll get into the crime and the causes potentially for it in the coming segment. But right now, if you guys can, for our audience, I want you to take us into the precinct houses, because I know obviously you've dedicated your lives to this. You know plenty of folks not only on the job right now, but also commanders that have to make decisions. Chief, what are you hearing now that you never heard before? In terms of where we are in 2020 at this moment in America, and how police feel about what they're facing?
Okay, very interesting. I'm hearing from a lot of the officers, especially the officers who are close to retiring, or in fact can retire, in fact that they're getting out in droves and the first possible chance they can. And the consistency, what I hear about them is that they don't want to be involved in a situation where they can be second guessed, where they have to take action, and because of the political climate, that they actually could either lose their jobs, go to jail, or get involved in the criminal justice system by just doing their job. So they're leaving in droves. The younger officers are saying pretty much the same thing, except for they don't have the ability to leave. So they're basically stating is that the system's against us, the political pendulum has swung, everybody's anti-police officers, and it's very, very difficult to do our job.
You mentioned, Anthony, I saw that not only demoralized, but you hear from cops they feel demonized right now. National polling is showing a picture that they haven't seen before, which is the majority of America says we got a problem, that black guy, white guy, they're going to be treated differently by law enforcement. And to that end, and they believe the problem is even systemic. Do cops look at this and say, listen, what happened to Floyd, nobody I've heard defends what Officer Chauvin did. Do they look at that as a one-off where they say, we got a real problem here, and it's overdue, but let's address it, but it doesn't make us all bad?
Yeah, so Rich, there's a number of issues that are going on there in regard to that. The officers that I've been speaking to, the same as Phil said, they feel like they're demonized. The anti-police rhetoric that's been going on since all of this has evolved, and I've seen it start as far back as the Ferguson incident is where I initially start to see this devolve, where police the morale is going down. But now it's gotten to a tipping point where I don't know how we bring it back, or how we walk it back, but the police officers that are out there day in and day out, as Phil said, the ones that are eligible to retire, they're leaving. There's no reason for them to stay at this point. The new officers that are coming on, they're kind of between a rock and a hard place because they signed up for a job where their heart was in the right place. They genuinely want to help people, and they feel like they're handcuffed at this point.
Philip, the last time you and I were here, you come from a family of law enforcement, not just immediate but extended family as well. And I asked you if you'd want your kid to be a cop, and you said I got to think long and hard about it, but probably not. Listen, I'll speak for myself, and I know the audience is going to call in a minute, and they're going to say, wait a minute, we saw what happened to Floyd. We saw what happened, out in Staten Island. We saw it with Gardner. It's happened video after video after video. I'll be honest. Until I saw some of those videos, I was like, please. Okay, yeah, we have some one-off. There's been a lot of incidents where I think the regular person says, okay, maybe there's a few bad apples, but this is happening all over the place. To that end, does the police have to reform, or do you look at a guy like Chauvin and say, yeah, he's one really bad apple, but that doesn't speak for police?
Absolutely not. And when you ask me what people in the police department are saying, I'm not co-signing that. I'm only telling you and repeating what I'm saying. So absolutely not. We make the comment that the police chiefs that says we don't know anybody who supported what this officer did. What was the officers on the scene? They supported it. But the issue we want to bring out, people in certain communities have been saying things have been going on for years. And now that video is partly substantiating what we've been saying for years. What are you putting in place from a law enforcement perspective to say we need to look deeper to ensure that our officers are not committing this act? And what they're hearing is nothing. Those individual police officers out in the field, the sergeants, they're not the issue. The issue is the systems in place. And the question that I will ask myself, and I ask any leader, what grade would you give yourself at being able to root out an officer who does not deserve to be there before an atrocious act happened? Or are you being very counterproductive? Are you waiting for incidents to happen and then not doing enough to root that system out? Law enforcement has done a very good job in the last 10 years of crime in this particular country. They have been able to renovate the systems. They've been able to change a lot of their systems. But what they have not been able to do is to identify a police officer who is showing the signs that he could be this Derek Chauvin before it happens. And that's what people in the community and the peaceful, law-abiding protesters are saying. Show me your system where you can vet this out prior to one of us dying, and then you'll see how supportive we can be. And I think we all deserve a not passing grade in law enforcement in that area.
You know, we talked about the protests and how a spot that it puts the police in, but certain police chose to handle it in different ways. And this, let me play a clip. This is from in Michigan, how one police chief, how he addressed the protesters and how he actually got involved.
We want to be with y'all for real. So I took my helmet off and laid the batons down. Yeah. I want to make this a parade, not a protest. You got little ones here, you got dogs, so what's up? So listen, I'm just telling you, these cops love you. That cop over there hugs people, so you tell us what you need to do.
Walk with us! Walk with us! Walk with us! Walk with us!
And then there was a scene in New York where there was another protest, and a lieutenant took a knee. And then he said later on, the cop in me wants to kick my own ass. He was ashamed about having done that. And another officer said, I'm glad he took it back because your officer out there battling with these guys, and that's what you do to show appreciation. Never show your weakness. It was that last line, Anthony, which is, I thought a lot of the problems that have happened is when you come on a scene, a cop has to show that he's in control, and there can't be any sign of weakness, I guess to use his phrase here. But at the same time, it seems that a lot of unnecessary escalations happen. I've even seen this in some of the protests. Listen, some of the protesters, right, whether they're anarchists or they're just idiots, right, they deserve to be arrested for what they're doing. Okay, the looting, but even some of the other stuff.
Right.
That said, though, there still is an us and them. Is that inevitable? Does it have to be that way? Forget the Pollyanna stuff. Is at the end of the day, when a cop is coming on the scene, does he have to look at the other person as, often seems at least, as shirts and skins?
So, Rich, to your initial point, I will tell you that when it comes to protests and demonstrations, there's been a body of research that's been done through the University of Nevada, Las Vegas. They have a crowd research council that they actually go out and research the sociology and criminology and the environment and how. But at the end of the day, the conclusion is that both the police and the crowd that gathers, they co-produce what ends up happening. So it's on both sides. You're 100% right. It's not just the crowd and the police reacting to it. There are certain things that police can do when they show up to a protest or a demonstration that are either going to escalate the tensions or de-escalate the tensions. And unless you're trained and you have a knowledge on and experience on how that works, you're already behind the 8 ball, and that's where things can go awry for police agencies that don't have that body of knowledge or that experience to be able to de-escalate when you need to.
To put a button on this segment before we get to the next one, you mentioned before we started, you remember the 60s, right? And how that percolated, and policing changed, right? And it's evolved many times. Are you really worried about where we are right now? With all, as you said, the early retirements, people just not wanting, also recruitment, it's been a challenge as well? Or do you think this is necessary for the police to reform and you're going to come out on the better end of it?
One, I think it's necessary. I'll say this, change is going to happen. The question is it going to be the change that's going to be the betterment for everybody, or is it going to be a change that's going to be a detriment to society? I'm very confident that we're going to see change. I'm not so confident whether the change is going to be positive or negative, and a large part of that is law enforcement. And I think I see snippets of it, understanding that change is not weakness. The fact that you have to pivot, change, and take a look at yourself from the inside out, that's not weakness. It's actually a sign of strength. And don't let anybody paint the picture that changing and pivoting is a sign of weakness, because it's not. It's a sign of strength.
All right, guys, stay with me. We talked about at the beginning the uptick in violence. It is real. In the next segment, we're going to talk about why. Why is this happening? It's also the question that I've got for you. Why do you think we are seeing the real spike in violent crime in this country. A toll-free number right there on your screen. If you haven't joined us, please do.